everyone, welcome to Coffee with Dragons. My name is Nicole White, and today we're going to be making this really fun little bangle bracelet. So as you can see, it's really kind of sweet. It's got that nice purple color with the beads. I found the beads at Walmart, glass beads in the beading craft section. The wire used on this bracelet was 18 gauge para wire that I got at Hobby Lobby on a spool. And so last night I tried to do a live stream tutorial of how this bracelet was made, and we kept running into issues. One of the issues that we had was that I kept bumping the camera rig. Also, I kept having to pull the bracelet out of frame to fix problems. I love working with 16 gauge wire, and if you've never worked with wire before, it's good to note that the smaller the number on the gauge, the thicker the wire is. So 16 gauge wire is relatively thick for jewelry wire. You don't want to go a whole lot thicker than that when you're working with wire wrap jewelry, just because it gets hard to twist and move. So the problem that I kept running into was working with the 16 gauge wire. I would have to pull the bracelet out of the frame in order to adjust the wire. It was not wanting to twist the way I wanted it to. And if I weren't filming, that wouldn't have been a problem. But as I was filming, it was kind of a problem. So that's the bracelet we're going to make today, and today instead of the 16 gauge we're actually going to be using 18 gauge wire. But first, what you'll want to do is assemble your tools. These are my pretty standard tools. These are the tools that I use all the time. We have the needle nose pliers. As you can see, we've got that nice needle bit here, and it's great for gripping or flattening. You got your flush cutter, which has that nice edge, flat edge against the blade, so you can cut things right close to the wire. And we also have the round nose pliers, or if you're like me, the 3-in-1 tool. I prefer the 3-in-1 tool over the round nose pliers simply because if I need to grip something, I have that flat bit here that I can grip with, or if I need to cut something, I have that cutter there too. And it's come quite in handy. Most of my tools I get at Walmart. You can get a pack of tools at Walmart that include a needle nose pliers, a round nose pliers, and a snips. The pack is about $7 to $10, and it's a pretty good pack. If you're new to wire wrapping, it is a cheap way to have the tools that you need really fast. You can also get flush cutters at Walmart. This is the pair of flush cutters that I get at Walmart, and I use them quite often, so they're actually very good tools. If you're interested in something in something that's a little more expensive, I did get both of these tools at Walmart, but my flush cutters that I use most of the time I got at Hobby Lobby. So those are the tools that we'll need, and then I also have our supplies. Now I put them all in a paper plate so they wouldn't go rolling all over the place. Today, instead of the 16 gauge wire, para wire, I'm actually going to be using 18 gauge para wire, and the reason is because I think this will wrap a little bit easier on camera. I also sort of folded up the edge so that I won't need to pull it out of camera to avoid hitting the rig as often. And I have about, what you can't see is that I have about 2 feet of wire here. It's all one piece. This bracelet is made on one piece of wire, so I have about 2 feet of wire on this one piece, and then I curled up the longer edge so that it won't get in the way. And we'll also be using these beads. Now, this was from the same strand of beads that I used last night, but last night I actually used I used round beads, and then they also had these elongated ones. So today the bracelet that I'm going to be making, I'm going to be using the elongated beads, but you can use round beads, you can use different sizes of beads, you can use different shapes of beads, you can use crystals, you can use real stone if you want. It's up to you. But if you're following along with me, a round bead or a slightly ovalish bead is a good thing to start with. So, what I've already got my wire pre-bent, and I will show you what you did. So I had about 2 feet of this antique bronze parawire, and I folded it I used my needle nose pliers to bend it at a 90-degree angle about 1/3 of the way up the wire. And so that one end of the wire is much longer, and that's the end that's curled up here, so it's easier to use. And one end is much shorter. You can see the length of it right there. My fingers are on the end of it. And a good thing to measure is that the shorter wire is actually going to be the base of the bracelet. So the shorter wire is going to be the one that goes around your wrist. And the longer wire is what's going to end up holding the beads in place on the bracelet. So if you're wondering where to bend the wire, a good idea is if you're like, oh, 2/3 of the way up, that could be, if you pulled off a really long piece of wire, that could be like ridiculous. But a good way to measure it is to take the wire and try and hold it up to your wrist or bend it around your wrist to see about what the length is. That's actually exactly what I did. I bent the wire around my wrist before we started to see about the length of where I needed to pull it from. So once you've got that 90-degree bend, then you're going to use your needle nose or your 3-in-1 pliers, and you're going to hold the longer end, the longer wire, with the needle nose pliers. And I usually hold it so that this is gripping the top of the wire, because what we're going to do is we're going to take the longer wire and we're going to bend it over. And as you can see, and we're going to bend it all the way around, as you can see, that is starting to create a loop. Now this loop is wonky, we're going to adjust that in a moment, but it's starting to create a loop, and this loop is going to end up being the toggle loop on our bracelet. So just use your needle nose pliers to kind of adjust it. Try and bend it into a circular shape. You can use your flat nose and your needle nose. But try and get the wire into a circular shape that is sitting on top, so it kind of looks like, I'll show you in a moment. It kind of ends up looking like a balloon on a string. Just like that. And the reason that I did that 90-degree bend first, this is important, because if you just wrap the wire in a circle, like without doing that 90-degree bend first, you would actually have trouble getting the wire to look like it's a circle all the way up, like it's just a circle that's centered on your main wire. But if you do the 90-degree bend first and then do it the way I did it, it'll be much easier for you to get that uniform circle. So then what you're going to do is you can use your fingers. I tend to use my needle nose pliers and grip the circle here with your needle nose, and then you take the other wire and you wrap it about 3 times around that base. Try and keep the wire as close to each other, as flush against, the wire turns as flush against each other as you can, for a nice uniform look. And that's what you end up with. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start adding our beads. First bead goes on, and it goes on the base wire. And you just slide it all the way up. And once you've got it all the way up, what you're going to do is because this wire here, when we're done wrapping it, you can kind of see how it came out on top. Now we want it to go underneath. So we're going to take the wire, we're going to wrap it around the bead underneath the main wire, and we're only going to wrap it one time all the way around. And try and get the wire, the turn, like you kind of, if I turn it this way, I think you can see that it's not hugging the center wire as tight as I would like it to. So what we do with that is we just adjust it a little bit. I'm going to zoom in just a little so it's easier to see. We adjust it so it's a tighter fit. And then you can also adjust the wrap around the wire. And I kind of like this. With the round beads, it was easier to get this wrap completely close to the bead, and that's usually what I go for. But I've never tried it with an elongated bead, so this is kind of fun, and I like the fact that the wire tends to be a little bit out from the bead, so we'll try to keep that uniform in this bracelet. So now we'll put another bead on. And it's the same basic principle, only this time instead, because we have the wire coming underneath, now we want the wire to end up over top of this bead. So we're going to take our wire and we're just going to fold it around like this so that it's laying over top of the bead. And then we will just do one wrap like we did last time. And you might want to take your needle nose or your flat nose pliers and just make sure that that is nice and tight. And you just continue on until you're done with the bracelet, or until you think you have enough beads on there that it'll make a bracelet. So add another bead. I'd never actually tried curling this wire up before when using this bracelet, but I think this is a technique I'm going to use more often, like this longer wire. I never tried actually curling it up before, but I think this is a technique I'm going to use a bit more often, as it does make it easier to grip and it doesn't poke near as much. Come all the way around. And you can kind of see that I am like I'm pulling on the wire. One thing, the reason that I keep running my fingers over the wire like this is, first of all, it helps keep it straight so that it doesn't get a whole bunch of kinks in it. Second of all, it does work hard in the wire. And I'm currently working with a 18 gauge dead soft pair wire. And dead soft wire means it's pretty much the softest wire that you can get. It's very flexible, very bendy, and it's great, absolutely fantastic for making fine wire wrap jewelry. But the thing with dead soft wire is that it is very flexible and it is very bendy, and so in order to make it stiffer and less likely to come undone, one of the things that a lot of jewelry makers is we do something called work hardening it, which is the more you pull on the wire, the more you bend the wire, even you can even hammer the wire, and it almost changes the molecular structure of the wire so that it becomes harder and stiffer. Now, working with wire a lot, if you work with the same wire a lot and you end up work hardening it too much, it will become brittle and it will break. So there is a fine line between work hardening it to a point where it's good and to a point where it's going to break and essentially make it either more difficult for you to finish the piece or ruin the piece entirely. So be careful when you are work hardening it, but it is good to know. So add another bead. And I'm just going to flip it around here so that I can get it. And this one's going to go underneath. And we'll just wrap that. Now I want to show you something too. One of the ways that I wrap a lot is I will hold or balance the rest of the wire. You can kind of see it right now in my hands, but I'll use my thumb at the base of wherever my wrap is to help guide the wire around. So right now I'll just use my thumb to kind of guide it, and then a lot of the times once my thumb gets to a point where it's going to fall off the wire, I'll stick my finger in there to help finish that bend. And this helps keep the wire nice and tight. You can kind of see nice and tight against the center wire and tight against itself, so that it gives you a really nice uniform look when we're done. Last night I was going to try and download the live stream and post that instead as a YouTube tutorial, but after I kept running into so many problems, I was like, no, I don't think I want that on there. So, and then this one, since our wire came out underneath, this time we're going to go over. This is how it's coming, guys. I'm just going to adjust a little bit. There we go. And that just looks really pretty. I love the way that that is coming out. That looks really nice. And I wish, like this, I don't think this camera and this lighting does great justice for how pretty these beads actually are. But they're quite shiny. And the paint that's on them, it just sparkles in the light. And I got them at Walmart some time ago. I don't even remember exactly when I got them. I just know that I did, and that I really liked them, and I've liked using them ever since, but I don't use them as often as I used to. And as I mentioned before, on the other bracelet, I'll show you. On the bracelet I did with the round wires, you can see how these circular bits are not very far out from the wire. I tried to keep them as tight to the bead as possible, but I'm really liking how this one's turning out with the wire being out a little bit from the bead. It kind of gives it an extra little flair that I didn't expect, and I really like how that is turning out. And that's another thing about wire wrapping. One of the beauties of doing any kind of art is that half the time the mistakes you make can be turned into something even more beautiful in art. So like there are a lot of times where I will be free wrapping a piece, which is basically where I don't have a pattern. I free wrap a lot, but I won't have a pattern and I won't have any real idea of what I'm trying to accomplish. I'll just be working, and my wire will break, or I'll suddenly wrap myself into place where I don't know how I'm going to get it to look the way I want it to, or get it to look good. And so a lot of the times that will pose a problem, and it'll cause me to troubleshoot or problem solve. And that problem solving sometimes will turn into something, will make the piece that I was working on even prettier than it originally was going to be. And so this one's going to go under. Grab it tight. And I'm just flattening it and straightening it with my fingers. That's another good thing about wire. I mean, yeah, working with it too much will make it brittle and will make it break, but for the most part, wire is pretty flexible, and it is also pretty workable and sturdy, so you can bend it around and work with it until it fits what you want it to fit, until it looks the way you want it to look. And so this one's going to go over. I'm just going to get another shot up here so you can see how nice and tight and flush those turns are. We want to make sure that they're nice and tight. That gives the bracelet a nice uniform look, and it looks more professional than if you have loose turns. And some of this will take, honestly, it'll just take practice. I have been working on wire wrapping for a little over 10 years. And I've been doing other crafting stuff too, but I've been wire wrapping seriously for a little over 10 years. And that said, I have experience enough to be able to control this wire and make it do what I want it to do without too much trouble. Now, I couldn't do this when I first started wire wrapping. I couldn't make the wire just do what I wanted it to do without fighting it a little bit. But like any craft, it's a learning experience, and it takes time, and it takes practice, and it also takes quite a bit of patience. If you don't have the patience for it, you're gonna run into problems. Now see, I want to show you something. I made a turn, and it was too tight. It wasn't quite what I wanted, so I had to unwrap it. And as you can see, I have a little bit of a kink in the wire now. Kinks are relatively easy to work out. I have flat nose pliers. You can sometimes do this with your fingers, but this wire is 18 gauge, and it's just thick enough. I don't really want to do it with my fingers. So what I'm doing is I'm taking my needle nose flat pliers, and I'm just gently kind of bending it back into a straight shape. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my fingers, and I'm gripping, you can kind of see how I'm gripping it, my fingers and my thumb, and I'm going to just pull it. And I'm going to pull those kinks right out of the wire. And so now it looks a lot like, very similar to the wire that I've used before. And so now we're just going to try again. Bend it around so it's at the right place, and we do our wrap once around. And we're almost at the end of our wire here, so I'm going to just pause a moment, I want to see if I can add one more bead, and I think I can. So I'm going to go ahead and take my last bead, the last one that I'm going to put on here, and then we will finish our bracelet. And then, so this, since this ended up over top of the wire, now I'm going to have to make it go underneath. And we'll finish this by wrapping it 3 times around the base, much like how we did down here when we wrapped it 3 times around the base. Now we'll wrap this one 3 times around the base. And once we got our wraps nice and tight, we're going to flip the bracelet over so you can kind of see how this is over. We're going to take our flush cutters and we're just going to, very close to the wire, we're going to take it and we're going to snip it. And then we'll take our needle nose pliers, and you can kind of see that edge there. If I run my fingers over it, it catches a little bit. So we're going to take our needle nose pliers and we're just going to gently press that down so that it doesn't catch, and it won't catch on skin or clothing, so it won't hurt. Now I want you to take, I'm just going to straighten a few things here. Now what you can do now is you can take your bracelet and make sure that it's straight, that it's not, you don't have the turns. You want the turns. You see how it's out and in and it's all to the side? You want it to be all to the side and even and straight, instead of like one to the side and one up and one down. Try and get them into a uniform line. So this is a great time to just like wrestle the wire a little bit. I use my needle nose pliers to press the turns together so they're nice and tight. And then I also will take my wire, you can see how I've got both of my hands around the bracelet, and I will pull it. I will pull it so that it's nice and straight. Now don't pull it too hard, because if you've been work hardening this wire, as we have been doing, there's a good chance pulling it too hard will actually snap it in half. But if you just take it and you kind of pull it tight like that, and you can see how that looks now. All right, so now what we need to do is we need to finish this end here so that we have a hook. And so much like what we did with the bracelet last night, don't know if any of you watched it, but if you did, then you'll know. We need to decide which side of this bracelet we're going to want up. It doesn't really particularly matter, but if you like one side of the bracelet more than the other side, you want to make sure you have that side facing upward. I kind of like this side better than this side, so I think we'll do it this way. And the reason that you want that is because when you finish your bracelet, you'll notice that the hook faces the inside of the bracelet, and that is where you don't want the hook facing out where it can catch on your clothing. You want it facing in, and whichever side is facing out is the side that everybody's going to see. So now that we've decided on the face of the bracelet, what we'll do is we'll take this wire here, and I'm going to just, at the very base of where the turns start, I'm going to bend it back with my finger so that it's at another 90-degree angle. Very similar, we're going to do something similar with how we made this end, but we're not going to use our needle nose pliers for this. So we bent it at a 90-degree angle, and you can see how it's bent right tight against those turns. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my finger and my thumb, and you can see how I've got my thumb placed at the base of the wire, and my finger is going to be held on the top of this wire, and we're going to use our thumb to sort of make a bit of a loop. And it comes out looking something like that. So now what I will do is I'll actually use my needle nose pliers to adjust the loop. I'm going to move it this way a little bit so it's not so far that direction. And I'm going to pull it down a little bit. You can adjust it to however you want to look at, however you want it to look, but I like it to look kind of like that. There we go. And so, there we are. And so now that we have that adjusted, now we're going to finish the end by taking our round nose pliers or our 3-in-1 tool, and we're just going to twist up. We'll take the very edge of the wire, the very end of the wire, in the very tip of our needle nose pliers, and we're going to turn it and turn it until the end of the needle nose, or the end of the wire, fits tight against the other wire, and that is to keep it from snagging on clothing or skin. So now that we have that done, and we're almost done with this bracelet, what we're going to do now is, you don't have to do this, but I tend to like to do this, especially with the thinner wire, because it makes it a little harder to bend out of shape. One of the things I talked about earlier in this video was work hardening a piece of jewelry, and there are several ways to do it. You can do it by using your pliers on it, rubbing your fingers against it. Another way that you can do it is by hammering it. And so I have here a jewelry anvil. It's not very big. I got it at Hobby Lobby. It's just like a solid block of metal. You could probably use a piece of stone that's flat, or I mean, you can go out and buy a jewelry anvil too. I love this because it's small, it fits easily in my bag, and it's pretty heavy. And then I also have, I'm going to zoom out here, oops, out, my jewelry hammer. Sorry for that, my video cut out for a moment, but you can use a jewelry anvil, and I have my jewelry hammer, and you can pretty much use a regular hammer as long as it has that flat end right there. But the jewelry hammer also has this rounded end, which if you're hammering a thicker piece of wire can make a nice texture, and that's kind of nice to use. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm actually going to be hammering this, I'm going to zoom in just a little, this bit of the wire here, and also this end of the wire. Now, one thing that I want to warn you about, I'm going to show you a technique that I use. If you end up placing the jewelry with the beads on it on the anvil like this, and you hammer it like this, what you'll have problems is the wire is actually being supported on the anvil by the beads. And hammering the wire in this position will break your beads, so you don't want to do that. So what I do instead is I will actually grip the wire in my flat nose pliers, and I will set the pliers on the anvil and hammer the pliers. And the reason being is because the pliers has this little extra thickness right here, so it gives the wire something to sit in, but it also keeps the beads. Let's see if I can show you. Give me a moment. It keeps the beads off of the anvil so that they're not resting directly on the anvil, they're actually sort of hanging there. So we'll do this in just a moment. Before I start, this table is kind of a little bit wobbly. I usually do this on my own leg. I'll set the anvil on my leg and do it that way. Today I'm going to be using a towel on this table so I can kind of show you how I do it. and we'll see if we can actually do it better this way. So I will grab a hammer, grip the thing I'm going to hammer. I'll lay it down against the anvil, and then I'll take my hammer and I'll just hammer it like that. Change the grip, hammer it again. Change the grip again, because I'm trying to get the whole thing hammered enough that it'll actually not want to bend out of place. And now you can kind of see how that gives it a nice flat edge. So now we'll do the same thing with the other side. Be careful when you're putting the wire, when you're putting this kind of wire into a needle nose pliers, be careful that you don't get it too far into the needle nose and accidentally put it in the cutter, because you will snip. I've done this so many times. You'll accidentally snip your wire, and then you'll have to figure out either how to fix it or you'll have to start over again. So you want the wire to be sitting in the flat part of the pliers. You can kind of see how that created a nice flat edge. So now moving you don't have to do that. I mean, your bracelet could be pretty much done without that, but I like doing that. It gives it a little extra, first of all, it gives it a little extra strength, and then it also seems to give it a little extra bit of flair. So now what we'll do is we'll take our bracelet and we'll start turning it into a circle. So you can either do this around your wrist or you can do it the way I'm going to do it. I'm just going to take the bracelet gently and start bending it and twisting it into a sort of circular shape. And we may have to adjust this clasp like I did last night. Yeah, it looks like I'm gonna have to. So what happened last night was much like what I did today. I made the hook on the clasp a little too large, so it would be bumping against someone's wrist. An easy fix for that is to just take your flush cutter, snip off the end, not too far up because you are going to have to curl it in again. And if you didn't work harden the end of the bracelet too much, you shouldn't have any problem taking your needle nose pliers. I'm going to try and turn it so you can see. Gripping the end of that wire and just turning it up. Much like what we did the first time. Just turning it up and back into the wire so it doesn't catch skin or clothing. Then take your needle nose pliers and just make sure that that's nice and flat. It's not sitting crooked, and you can adjust it as needed. There. and just finish adjusting it, finish. There we go. And there's your bracelet. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. It's great. This is a great, if you've not worked with wire before, this is a great tutorial to start with. If you have worked with wire before, it's a fun, very fast thing that you can do, but it also is great to teach children how to start wire wrapping. And so if you're gonna put it on, you can just slide it on. It's also relatively easy to clasp. I usually do it on top of my wrist. You just press the two together until the hook catches, and it actually pulls itself out. And you can see how that looks, and then just switch it around. And then you just, to take it off, it's much the same. You just push until the hook undoes, and you are all set. There we are. If you liked this tutorial, feel free to like and comment. You can also subscribe. I'm going to be doing some more wire wrapping tutorials coming in the future months. And I look forward to hearing from you and seeing your projects. God bless. Have a great day.